Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to share a little bit what we do, and I'm going to try my best to explain the PDM light. That might be the confusing part, but I'm going to try my best. So, well, I do have Echo shoes on me today, so that's good. Not sure I have the Akrapovic exhaust system in the car in the garage, but I go home and I'm going to check. I'm quite sure you don't have an Airbus back in your garage at home. But the chance is pretty good that at least you did fly here on an Airbus, because we have roughly half of the market. There seems to be a US-based company that have the second half of the market. So, Airbus in a nutshell, yes, I'm going to start a little bit with Airbus, of course. I'm going to explain a little bit what we do in PLM and what is then perhaps the PDM light that we have invented as a term. Going to share with you very openly where we are with Aras. So didn't brought a lot of fancy slides. I brought the slides from the team. So there are a lot of text, but I think you can enjoy the text at least when you go home and read it perhaps. Sharing a few of the applications that we do develop for the moment, and of course wrap up with a small conclusion. I think the Q&A we can save for the afternoon. I stay in the afternoon and we have an unconferenced session in the afternoon. Aerospace is a fantastic industry, of course. I came from automotive 5-6 years ago, joining the aerospace. Somehow the figures speak for themselves. 3 billion passengers, 58 million jobs supported in the global aerospace industry. $2.4 trillion spent in the industry. I'm not sure we can translate that. There's a lot of zeros, I guess. But it's actually 3.4% of the global GDP. So that's a big part of the global economy that somehow the aerospace industry is driving and triggering. Airbus Group, so I work for Airbus, so the commercial side. But Airbus Group globally is roughly 144,000 people, 60 billion of annual revenue. And what is maybe the totally unique thing in this type of industry, we do have an order book of close to 700 billion euros. So in some cases, that means if you do come after the presentation and you order from me an A320, I'm afraid that you have to wait like 9 years. So it's a fantastic journey. I mean, many of you coming from industries where you try to sell the day production or the next quarter of production and so on and so forth. I did the same coming from the automotive industry. You worry about the next quarter. You don't worry about 9 years down the road. On top of the Airbus products, we have helicopters, and we do have a defense and space division as well. But yes, Airbus is the big brother. We have roughly 2/3 of the volume. And we are roughly 60,000 people, 40 billion annual revenue. And as I said, the backlog is fantastic, 9 years for some of the products. And right now, in fact, the biggest problem we do have is not to develop new products. More or less, we said we stopped doing that. We focus on small incremental innovations. And we're going to try to ramp up the production because, of course, it's a little bit too long to wait for a new plane. And maybe many airlines today, they buy a bit on speculation. So it's not the healthy sort of situation. So for the biggest selling family, we do today roughly 40 airplanes a month. And we try to ramp up to around 60. It doesn't sound a lot, perhaps, but it's very, very complex to do that. It's not so much, perhaps, the Airbus factories and assembly plants. We can probably do that, but it's the whole supply chain. It's thousands and thousands of companies that needs to step up and start delivering on a higher level. We are the most global company. We are the only company that actually producing aircrafts in all the regions. So of course Europe. We are a European-born and based company with strong presence in Germany, France, UK and Spain. That's sort of our birth. On top of that, since a few years, we do have assembly plants and engineering facilities in China. And we just inaugurated the plant in US in Alabama. So that's quite unique. We are the only one. There is basically in the segment we're operating, there's only two companies operating for the moment, Airbus and Boeing. And we basically splitting the market. So you can see they're kind enough to say main competitor, but you can read Boeing. You can see that we're splitting the market half-half, give and take. It varies a little bit over time. In fact, we don't want to be growing too much. It's healthy to have a competitor. It's healthy to splitting the market. And to be honest, the fear is not so much the Boeings. It's the development of Chinese aircraft in India, in Russia, and other places where they tried to do that. And in particular in China, they did roll out single aisle, the smaller families. They did roll out one prototype fully built the other week. Probably going to be up and flying within a year or two, and then of course start to become a bit of a competitor to us. Well, you can see the fantastic growth we have had. We started roughly early 70s. We had the first big families here. And then you can see we're really ramping up, and you see the order backlog is even ramping up quicker than that. This is the family. The smaller family is the big seller. That's what you normally would fly in Europe. Then you have the long-haul flights with the latest plane, the A350, being shipped about a year ago to the first customers. So big development over 7, 8 years, pretty much on time, which is unique in the industry. And then we have the Pride. That's the big A380, a double-decker. It's a fantastic plane to be on. It's a fantastic plane because the airliners, they do earn a lot of money. It just so happens it's a loss-making business for Airbus. So a small concern for us. We will be breaking even as of this year. But then we need to keep in mind we did deliver this one first time in 2007. So it's almost 10 years from shipping the first product until breaking even. So that's give you a little bit of flavor of the investment and the difficulties and the risk in our sort of business. And of course, if you start speaking about PLM system, we're going to see that in a few seconds. Keeping track of a big baby like this with 3 million parts, it's of course a bit of a challenge to develop a system for that. It's actually a growing business, despite financial crisis, despite oil prices going up and down. They only turn out to be small hiccups in the curve of growth. So basically, we do double every 15 years. We do expect a growing business, roughly 31,000 new aircraft by 2033. So there is a big market, big enough for a couple of companies still, I guess. The big question might be this one. Will aircraft be smaller, bigger? How will they look for the future? We do believe that an aircraft like A380, taking somewhere between 500 and 800 passengers, is probably the plane for the future, because the big mega cities in Asia in particular are growing. So actually the limitation today is to getting a slot to take off or land in those cities. So the more people you can cram into one plane and one slot, the better it's going to be. And in fact, we might, for the future, even extend that one to take 1,000 passengers. And out of curiosity, what is the limitation? Well, we can certainly make it fly. The engines are there, the structure is there. No, it's actually the things, stupid small things like you actually need to evacuate in case of emergency. You need to evacuate this one in 90 seconds. So how do you get 1,000 people out of a plane like this in 90 seconds? That's sort of some of the limitations that you're facing when you're growing the planes. Well, it's all about delivering value for the airlines, for the global economy, but also connecting people. There is a need of traveling. It's just growing. People want to see other places. They want to meet people. They want to meet other cultures. So let's, with that sort of introduction, let's focus on PLM and the PDM Lite part. Airbus is still undergoing a bit of a transformation. We used to be a we used to have a very high level of vertical integration. So basically we did everything, a little bit as we saw perhaps from Echo, doing everything from the cow to the final product. I'm not sure you do the cow, but I guess you have a cow somewhere. But we used to have that. Somewhere 10 years ago or so, we started to shift a little bit. We started to realize this is going to be too complex. So we go for much more of becoming an integrator. So we do the integration of the plane, we do the concept, we do the architecture, and we do integrate. But we have today a supply chain delivering most of the value, most of the components. Some of those companies used to be Airbus companies, are still perhaps Airbus companies, but we try to sell them, we try to spin them out, and we foresee a rather dramatic change in the supply chain over the years to come. It's what you saw in the automotive industry. We are probably like 20, 30 years behind. But today, the big OEMs in the automotive, they just designing the car, they put the brand, they put it together and market and sell it. It's going to be more or less the same in the aerospace industry. And you would expect perhaps a big consolidation in the supply chain as well. Today, it's very scattered, rather small companies. And that, of course, put a bit of a limitation on the PLM environment as well. So we do need a very effective, collaborative design environment to make this happen, because we do it really on a global basis with a big supply chain. So I did join Airbus 6 years ago. There is a bit of a legacy. It's rather chaotic. It was actually 4 companies based in Germany, France, Spain, and UK that was forming Airbus, or EADS at that point in time. That meant that we couldn't really develop one single system, so we took the legacy systems. For the first one out was the A380. We basically took the existing 4 system. We tried to put a little bit in the middle to keep it all together. You might remember that when we started to assemble this plane, and we started to connect the electrical wires, in some cases there was a little bit of a gap. That's not so good if you have an electrical component and there is a 30 centimeters gap. Because the CAD systems, the DMU systems didn't really detect that. So when they started to build the plane, they detected that, and that cost us a small fortune. So that was the start, perhaps, in a stronger focus on the PLM environment. So the next one we did was the military transport plane, A400M. So there we took the opportunity to at least have one system, but we still put it in each NATCO and we replicate in between. So we couldn't go the full-blown way to one single system. And the first time was with a new plane, A350, where we did one single system. And it looks quite simple. This is the picture. This is the PLM environment inside Airbus. It looks quite simple. We do have an offering environment based on CATIA from Dassault, together with Delmia. We have a digital mock-up with the VPM also from Dassault. We couple that to the PDM PLM system windshield from PDC. So in principle, it looks quite simple. In reality, of course, there is a few more components. What is unique then is the confidentiality line into the extended enterprise, because we do have roughly 100 risk-sharing partners that do real-time design. So we have provided them an interface so they can do real-time design. They see only the part they are responsible for and the surrounding, but that they can do in real time. So they have the connection. It's in fact a little bit too, well, you need too much computing power to do the full plane. So there we do a calculation of the digital mock-up overnight. So we have special applications for the full-blown plane. So we're providing the engineers every single morning, fresh when they do arrive. They would have a few hundred, here stated 700 DMUs calculated for the full plane. So they can subscribe, they can define, and we calculate overnight. So it's a fairly huge system. Today there would be probably 10,000 PDM users, probably 5,000 VPM users. Most of them are, as I said, in the extended enterprise. The data keeps on doubling with a high speed. And when we developed this one, it was maybe not the pieces of technology that is the most important part. Some of the components, if you go into the details, it was actually CATIA R18, it was windshield version 8, and if you're familiar with those versions, you know they are basically out of the market already. But it's the processes behind. We went to full 3D, skipping the drawings, skipping the 2D drawings, which is the big thing in an aerospace company where you do certify each and every plane. Real-time interface with extended enterprise. So some of those processes are probably world-class. Some of the technologies are good pieces of technology, maybe not the latest and greatest generation and versions. But it's the complete system that makes a difference. So I shared a little bit of the history. It's a bit chaotic in a way. I keep, for the moment, not one PLM system up and running. I probably keep minimum 4 different systems, one for each family of airplanes we do have. On top of that, totally in the landscape, I keep up roughly 2,000 applications. So this is a fairly big machinery. But we do have a plan. We would like, as many of the previous speakers also said, one single source of truth, one single PLM system. So that's what we strive for. The starting point for us is not so great because many of the applications we do have is obsolete. On the other hand, we have a fantastic system in the A350 PLM that I just shared. And by the way, we have been winning a few awards in Germany and France for that system, CIO of the Year and similar in France. So we do have a good starting point in terms of that, but we have a very scattered, very obsolete landscape. But we clearly have a big ambition to go for one sustainable Airbus PLM platform. And it's basically going to contain the big components that you saw on the previous slide. So the offering environment, the manufacturing environment from Dassault with CATIA and Delmia, the enterprise PLM backbone from PDC with the windshield component. So then you might ask yourself, where is then Aras? Where is then this PDM Lite and the strategic partnership that we did sign earlier this year? Before coming to that, just one word. The next generation going to be so much more focusing on the end-to-end. Today we have been focusing much more on the engineering part, which is of course important for a big engineering company like Airbus. But the big value of the PLM for the future are going to come from an end-to-end sort of perspective, also well reflected by the previous speakers. So of course, if we can at least connect engineering and manufacturing in a much better way tomorrow than today, we have opportunities to gain a lot of value. I can give you a few examples just to measure the bonding points in a plane. It's like 30,000 bonding points. And today it means that you're getting the drawings, you check the drawings, you're trying to find the bonding point in the plane, you crawl around, you have your measurement equipment, you write it down, you type it into the computing system. So could you have one seamless system with perhaps augmented reality? You're getting the virtual reality overlapping the physical aircraft. You can find your point, you measure. It's connected directly to the computer systems. Of course, if you have 30, 40, 50,000 bonding points as a manual work today, you can imagine the savings we could have for that for the future. So that's actually something we have implemented just a few months ago. So then Aras, we observed that on top of what I discussed, we have a lot of applications where we went for Excel-based, was also mentioned by some of the previous speakers, or it was based on a .NET homegrown application, or maybe we took the windshield, the corporate backbone, and we tried to develop an application. And it was neither solution was really good. We didn't, with the Excel, of course, get the functionality we wanted. .NET solutions was difficult to develop all the standard functionalities. And in many cases, going to an enterprise PDM, PLM backbone like windshield was probably shooting a little bit over the target. A bit too costly, a little bit too complex. So for those roughly 1,000 applications that we have in the PDM Lite sort of box, there is a good portion where we could do different. So we started to define some functional needs, some IS architectural needs, and some PDM Lite needs, which is more the cost and the long-term viability, upgradability, and things like that. So when you see the functional needs, they're not too far, perhaps, from a classical PDM, PLM system, but not quite. You don't see a lot of things like CAD integration, DMU functionality, and things like that. So it's, in fact, somewhere in between a classical PDM and a document management sort of system or content management system. So we started to define that. We made a selection. I'm going to show you a little bit in the coming slides, a little bit more the methodology, the outcome, etc. But just to cut it short, I do believe this was like a year ago, I guess. We came to the conclusion that Aras was fulfilling our needs for this particular platform. At that point, we were investigating Aras version 10. So out of the box, many of those criteria was fulfilled. You can see some of the strong points. And in fact, if you're looking at the points, you can see that some of the initial concerns is perhaps not only connected to Aras, it's also connected to Airbus and the Airbus environment. You're going to see that on some of the following slides, in fact, that introducing a backbone like Aras in a complex integrated environment like the one in Airbus is not only about the software component, it's about how you can integrate it and fit it into the environment. But clearly, we had a significant coverage of the expected growth scope. Easy to integrate and handle. We do like the customization feature that you have, that you can develop and change the data model on the fly. And support of the migration of data when version is upgraded. There's probably two things, if I would pick out two things why things tipped over to Aras in the favor, is the upgradability and the whole business model. Why do we have such an old, obsolete landscape? Well, it's very, very complex and costly to upgrade the various applications, PDM components, CATIA, etc. So here we are attracted by the fact that we can get an upgrade of the system sort of free of charge and in a smooth manner. So that was important. The cost of the total cost of ownership is then very, very important. Well, some of the initial concerns, as you can see, a bit unique to us, but that's our reality. We were standardized at that point in time on Internet Explorer 8. Probably you have 11 or something, 12, or I don't know where we are today. But that's our sort of reality. Of course, there was a bit of a limited experience in the supply chain at that point in time, and I'm going to come back and touch upon that. So here's a bit of the criteria we put up. So fairly classical. We don't need to walk that through in detail, but of course we had functional requirements. We had the technical requirements, and we had more what we call the PM Lite, but it's more the cost, the viability, etc. So there's different weights on the need of that. And we did a fairly thorough assessment. So here you see the result, and I guess it's fairly obvious why we did select Aras. You see it on the left side. There was a very, very good coverage of all the aspects that we put into this benchmark. You can see that probably one or two of the other solutions could have been a possibility, in particular number 4. So obviously I took away the names, there's no point, but it's fairly likely that that one was a PDM system. So you see the functional coverage is very good. As I said, the classical full-blown enterprise PLM system was probably overshooting a little bit what we wanted and needed for this particular PDM Lite functionality. But you can also see then, as I said, the concern might be that the cost, the complexity, the upgradability of solution number 4 would be too high. So here Aras played out well, and we did select Aras. Just to explain a little bit, it's a bit busy slide. But out of all the functionalities that we sort of have the need for, we see that PDM cover a big portion. We see that the Aras cover a big portion. And we see that the CMS, the documentation management system, they do cover a big portion. So somehow there is a bit of an overlap between the CMS, the PLM word, and what we then nicknamed the PDM Lite word. So there is a set of functionalities that was not well covered necessarily by the CMS. So there we use Alfresco and other components, or the classical PLM word. And inside Airbus, and I'm going to show you some of the examples, there is a big space for these PDM Lite applications. So a few news where we are. We did select this about a year ago. We did sign the enterprise agreement July this year. So we have had a fairly rapid development during this year. We have today 3 applications in productions. We have another 3 in development, and we have in fact a rather big pipeline of potential candidates to develop. In fact, we're holding back a little bit because we would still like to prove the upgradability, the migration of the data. So I'm going to discuss that in a second. That's maybe the only remaining part for us to fully verify. So that's ongoing, as stated on the slide. It's ongoing. I'm going to share that. We have the enterprise agreement. We also have a methodology to develop very quickly applications. So getting away from the 1 to 5 year sort of development for the classical PDM system. So here we call it the greenhouse. It's a very rapid prototyping. And here, Aras has been selected as one of a few standard platforms to do very quick, rapid prototyping. So we have examples where we have developed an Aras application in just a few months, which is very quick for Airbus at least. And we do have a center of competence for Aras inside Airbus. So we have addressed the supply chain. We have a standardized way of working. So that means for certain aspects, since long we have Capgemini for architectural topics. We have, in this case, in this parameter, we have Infosys as a big integrator. And what we did add was Minerva as a certified and a partner to Aras for the specific competence around Aras. So by that we have solved the concern about competence and the supply chain topics, and we are absolutely confident in this setup, and we combine it, of course, with internal leadership from my team that is more driving the design and the program and the project management. But all the development and all the detailed design is done in the supply chain. Focus on applications. The first application we have is test information management. That's where we started. So this is a fairly complex installation. We do test the airplanes, so rest assured. This is about structured test. It's quite fantastic if you come and see it. So you take the plane, stripping out all the electronics and cabin and stuff like that. So it's just the mechanical structure. It's a mechanical test, in particular for the wings. And in fact, what you do, you have a static test and you start bending the wings to see they can flex enough. And for the A380, the requirement was plus minus 6 meters. So when you fly, if you see the wing flapping a little bit, don't worry. Up to plus minus 6 meters, fully okay. And in fact, once we had tested and certified that, we tried to break it. And I'm not quite sure, but I think it was another couple of meters before it actually broke, and then it scatters like that. So it's a big business, a lot of sensors, a lot of planning, a lot of people. So basically, this is a system to take care of the whole planning, the whole data management, the reporting. And basically, you have dashboards, you have test campaign interfaces, you have workflows to make sure it happens. You have synchronization with other part of the document systems. You have shared folders for tests, you have data exports, and you have search functionalities. So rather complex, rather big machinery just to keep this up and running. Absolutely, this could have been developed in a normal standard PDM system, no doubt. But the complexity, the flexibility would have been different. So this is how we did set it up. So yes, we have a central server and some users, but we also have distributed vaults, so that has been tested. We have connected it back to the authentication systems and email service and iShares and other things. It's actually in our mind, and also the extended enterprise access has been verified and tested. So we've done 3 releases since we deployed the first one, so it's fairly mature in that sense. We do have roughly 300 active users, roughly up to 100 people connected concurrently on a daily basis. And it's a fairly big system because it's designed for 500 test campaigns a year. I'll spend a few minutes on this one because that's the remaining part to verify. So why we selected Aras, as I said, was partly due to the fact that we liked the upgradability. So now we're testing that. So this is the schema. So we did prepare it. This was back in July, I do believe. We dumped the code and we're sending it, we masked the data, we were sending it to Aras. During summertime, there was a few iterations where we got the upgrade. Well, in fact, we went from 9.3 to 11, so I do believe there was a couple of versions in between to make it happen. Maybe more complex than normal. So there was a few iterations between Aras and us through Minerva acceptance. So there was a few defects, bugs happening. So 7 was maybe a little bit too much, but this is the first time. It was a couple of releases upgraded, so not too alarming. And then we went into the final sort of Airbus acceptance, and we still had a few things to tune. We expect to go live, move into production by mid-November, end of November. So, in fact, we could potentially just do this electronically, but due to security reasons and due to the fact that we cannot allow more than 1 day production stop, we would like Aras to come to Airbus and on-site together with us doing the final move into production. So that adds, of course, a little bit to the cost to fly the team over, but it's going to be necessary at least in the beginning. So by end of the month, we would have done even this if everything goes according to the plan. So no real blocking points for the moment. The last business acceptance test is ongoing, and we would be able to go into production any day. So from this, we have nothing alarming. You can say 6 months sounds a lot. For us, it's not alarming. It's the first time. We need to practice a bit, so we're quite happy. The cost is good, not too expensive. It's free of charge, plus what we pay on top. We're quite impressed by the ability to handle an unknown solution. So we have developed a solution. We dumped the code, and you still can upgrade it. This is perhaps a point to mention. So backward compatibility is good, no less. But there is no more either. So we don't get anything on top of that. We get what we had in the previous version, we get in the new version. Nothing less, nothing more. So fair enough, that's the model that works. Well, you can see that maybe the difficulties looks more than the strength. But once again, that's more perhaps connected to the first time. It's connected to the Airbus way of working. So from my side, nothing alarming. We're quite impressed by the ability to do that. The cost is low. But yes, we need a final sort of confirmation. And globally, the experience is very good. I will leave you with a few examples so you can get the flavor. I will not read the slides, the standard description of a few projects. Typically, if you take time and reading the slides, you're going to see that this was based on a legacy business tool. This was done in I think it was perhaps .NET technology. The next example going to be an Excel-based technology. Typically, we just implement the workflows and the business logic in Aras quite rapidly. This was only sort of 8 months. The business like it. We're getting also a lot of add-on functionalities that we didn't get in the past because we did write the code, and of course that limits a little bit the functionality. So here we get free of charge a lot of functionalities that the customer do like. This is another example. This was based on an Excel spreadsheet sort of application in the past. Once again, we took the Aras core features and the workflows, and we implemented the business logic into that. And once again, very good performance, excellent search and import functionalities that we didn't have in the past. Also, the business do like the flexibility. They can do a lot of things on their own. In fact, not even using the IT department, so they're quite happy. The two one I just showed, they are in production. The third one would be in production any day soon. And let me spend the last few minutes on a bit of a conclusion then. PDM Lite. Well, it's not quite the PLM, as I tried to explain, but it's sort of at least inside Airbus, we have an understanding of this defined space. We know where to use it, and it's going to play a very vital role in the Airbus application landscape. We have, as I said, large pipeline of possible applications. Typically, they're ranging with a user community of from perhaps 50 to 100 users up to maybe a few thousands, but it's not, for the moment at least, not going to be the enterprise PLM backbone. I think you understand we invested hundreds and hundreds of millions and years into that backbone, and replacing and ripping that out, that's another sort of story. We did select it. We did select Aras based on a thorough benchmark study, of course. Today, the needed competence and the supply chain and the infrastructure is fully up and ready. You saw the marketing. We're ready to launch. We do develop and deploy. The feedback is excellent. User feedback is excellent, good availability, good performance, but also the IT teams are really pleased and happy. They see a very good, flexible and powerful tool to develop applications of various sort. As I stated, we're a bit conservative, a bit cautious, but I do think it's a very positive start on the upgradability. We're going to see the proof of the pudding by the end of the month. What's going to happen then? A word of warning. What's going to happen when we have not one application, but we have 10 applications a year. When we have 50 applications a year, it's scalable. So that's a challenge to the Aras community to, of course, make that happen. What's going to be the next step? Well, we're going to complete the upgradability. We're going to continue to use it. We're going to explore the full potential, as I said, in this rapid prototyping environment to develop similar type of applications. But then, of course, as I stated, we are quite impressed by the business model, by the flexibility. I think it was mentioned by someone, even considering to developing an HR system. And that's a little bit how we see it. I mean, some of the applications that you saw is maybe you don't even connect them to sort of PLM environment or PDM environment. But it's true, for us, the platform goes a bit beyond the classical PLM. It's very flexible, very quick, very dynamic. So we're quite optimistic. We like, in particular, the business model. So far, quite successful journey, only 1 year. We're going to take opportunities. We're going to explore it. And I think there are plenty of opportunities also to make a bit of an in-route into perhaps the more classical PLM platforms or PLM space inside a company like Airbus. But please keep in mind, and I think you appreciate that, we do certify the flying plane, so we take it a bit slowly and surely to make sure we have everything under control, which I do think you appreciate. Thank you.